We have to see each other as real human beings. And as we form that relationship, sometimes disagree, but be okay with disagreement, I think we're going to find the solutions.
Welcome to Restorations. I'm Caitlyn McKenney, and in 2025, the conversation around homelessness, addiction, and untreated mental illness is changing rapidly. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, released their nationwide report on homelessness right at the end of 2024, and it revealed the highest number on record and the largest increase on record. In Washington state, we have the third largest population experiencing homelessness, right behind Los Angeles and New York. After more than 2 decades of housing first policy mandated by the federal government, it is long past time for a change in our approach. Maybe you've heard the media talking about a vibe shift happening right now in culture and politics, and that shift is definitely happening when it comes to how the public and politicians are approaching and addressing homelessness. And the proof of that change in momentum is right here in Seattle, and down the coast just a little in Portland and also in San Francisco, 3 bastions of urban progressivism. No one has been more devoted to housing first and harm reduction, but things are changing. Take a look. In Seattle, we saw NPR's KUOW release an audio documentary asking tough questions about housing first and having honest conversations with people on both sides of the issue. In the same week, The Stranger, a progressive Seattle publication, asked where the left went wrong on homelessness. Danny Westneat for the Seattle Times praised the mayor of Portland for opening 200 emergency shelter beds. These will help Portland use the camping ordinance they passed last year to move people from the streets and into available shelter. And finally, San Francisco's supervisor, Matt Dorsey, announced plans for the mass arrest, detox, and treatment of users to solve drug-related lawlessness downtown. Ben Kowaler for the Free Press spoke to law enforcement and people on the streets of San Francisco. Here's what they had to say.
To fix San Francisco, or fix at least this?
To be honest with you, it's resources. You travel to some of the places that don't have social services, they're thriving. Their sidewalks are clean. You don't have any drug use out on the street. You don't have anyone leaned over. You don't have an environment like this.
So you're not saying there aren't enough resources. You're saying there are too many resources.
Cut back on resources, 100%.
Struggling. We want these things to happen.
San Francisco's a shit show.
How would you fix it?
We would go more to helping the people live better in San Francisco more than give out free needles.
I used to be like one of them until I got clean.
How did you get sober? What made you get sober?
Prison time.
2 years ago, even 1 year ago, you would be canceled, ostracized, ridiculed for questioning harm reduction, for proposing incarceration as a tool for treatment, for enacting a camping ban, or for daring to suggest, like this police officer did, that an abundance of free social services has a magnet effect on people. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, but as a reminder, here is King County Executive Dow Constantine last summer.
One widely held belief is that behavioral health issues like untreated mental health or substance use disorders are root causes of the homelessness crisis that we see all around us. This is wrong. University of Washington researcher Greg Colburn has shown that the cause of the homelessness phenomenon is not individual challenges, but a housing market failure.
The experts and the academics and the politicians have had a monopoly on homelessness policy for so long, but that's changing now. I think we need everyone on board from every background and every side of the political spectrum, and certainly no one should be afraid to give a voice to the reality that they're seeing right in front of them. If Seattle and Portland and San Francisco can pivot from the failures of housing first and harm reduction, then we know that every city in the U.S. can do the same. And that means more people in recovery, fewer people living unsheltered, and healthier, safer communities for all of us. Joining me for a conversation on homelessness is Kim Cook. Kim is the CEO of Bread of Life Mission, located in Seattle's historic Pioneer Square. And Kim recently spent 24 hours outside in front of the mission on a bench, live streaming her conversations with people experiencing homelessness and people working to bring people out of homelessness. And so I'm glad to be joined today by Kim to talk a little bit about her experience over those 24 hours. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, I want to say kudos for surviving 24 hours outside in the winter in Seattle. That's impressive. And we're going to watch in a moment here some clips from the conversations that you had over that 24-hour period. But first, can you share just a little bit about your background and your role at Bread of Life and what inspired you to do this project?
So I've been here in Seattle for a year and a half now. I came out to take the job at Bread of Life, and prior to that, I was the CEO at a rescue mission in upstate New York for 9 years. We're part of an association called Citygate Network, and that's over 300 rescue missions across North America. And they wanted to do a pilot of 15 missions across the country doing conversations on a bench. And as soon as I heard it, I said, oh, I need to do this. So I was part of 15 that did it last week.
I didn't realize that there were 14 others that joined you, all on the same 24
All
hours?
the same night.
Wow,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful to be in Seattle because it was cold here, but it was single digits on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll take Seattle.
That's amazing. Well, okay, the first clip that I want to show is from your director of education, I think, at the mission. So let's watch that.
Schooled, skilled, secure, settled, and serving. And the thing is with that, not everybody needs everything.
So tell us these 8 S's that he shows us.
Well, and again, this is something that came originally from Citygate Network. They talk about life transformation begins and ends with an S, and they had these 8 S words. I like them so much, I said, let's use these as a framework for our program. And so each guy is in a different phase of these 8 S's. So they start with safe. You need to get people off the street, get them decent food, healthy food, make an appointment with a doctor, all the basics, get them ID. And then the next one is sober. We're building out a sobriety program. Not everybody needs that, but for those who do, that will go with them throughout their entire program and hopefully their entire life as they stay in recovery. The next would be stable, and that's emotional and mental stability. It's things like anger management, proper boundaries. I teach one on emotional intelligence. And so it's just learning who they are, why they do what they do. And it's many of the things that the average person gets as they grow up from, good, healthy parents. Many of these guys don't have that or have forgotten it from their time on the street. So we teach classes around all of that. Mm-hmm. The next is schooled and skilled. If somebody needs a GED, we want to work with them to get that. Or maybe they need 3 more classes to finish a college degree and they never got that. And if they did, they could have so much better income than if they don't. So we want to help with that. And the skilled piece is collaborating with other partners in the area to help them find really meaningful employment, not just a minimum wage job, but let's help them find a career where they can have a living wage and afford to live in our city.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? And then the next is secure. We have actually a lot of guys in our building right now who are working full-time jobs, and they're taking budget classes and so on, and they're showing us that they're saving money. And when they're ready, we'll help them to move out. But this is where they kind of get their legs under them with that new employment. And then the next is settled. When they move out of our place, we want to give them a box that will help them in their new apartment, silverware and plates, the basics, right? And we want to keep up with them as they move out, so that as they move out of our community, they don't go into a black hole and we never hear from them again. Or if they have trouble maintaining their sobriety, we want to help them to stay solid where they are instead of going all the way back to being homeless. We'd like to kind of help them to stay there. And then the last is serving. Serving is kind of it shows us that they're in a healthy place. They might be serving within a church community, or volunteering at the mission or somewhere else in the community. And it's a marker for us that they're no longer looking at their daily emergency and trying to problem solve that, but they can actually look up and out. And that keeps them healthy too. It keeps them with other people.
So many people say that. And I think it's important to note that it's a pathway, right? And so it's really hard to be secure and settled and serving if you're not sober or you're not safe.
Right.
So you have to start with those things in order to make it to the end.
It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of need.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, well, next I want to show a clip from Jonathan Cho, who is a senior fellow and journalist here at Discovery Institute. I think he had something really interesting to say.
Something that I experienced for the first time in my life coming here several years ago was what you're describing, which is cancel culture. You're either with us or you're against us. There was no effort to collaborate. There was no effort to find common ground. Like you said, agree to disagree and, find a solution for the greater good.
I think this is true. I want to hear your thoughts on it. But I really appreciate what you did over this 24 hours, which is kind of the antidote to what Jonathan is talking about. You brought a really diverse array of voices to the table, to the bench, should we say. So do you feel like this is true in Seattle, that when you first came, or even now, it was hard to have those conversations?
I think it's like that in most cities. I know that where I came from in New York, it was similar, and we went through a process where we really tried to get everybody at the table and have these kind of collaborative discussions. And I'm seeing glimpses of that here in Seattle. People really do want to come together and, together we can get more done. And so I'm starting to hear those kind of collaborative meetings. I think we're still a little afraid of stepping on each other's toes when we don't agree. But I see it moving forward. I see glimpses that are really positive.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that was displayed in the conversations that you had. One of the things I noticed in listening to some of these conversations was that we have our values and our ideals, and then we have the reality on the street right in front of us. And sometimes those things we have to make those things match up in our own minds. And someone who captured this idea really well, I think, was Karen Salinas, who is the director of outreach at Reach Seattle. Let's listen to this clip of her capturing that idea.
This area struggle with is the concept like reconciling harm reduction ideals, principles that we would like to adhere to, with the real life violence that is a product of the things that have led us here, And so then what does accountability look like is a real question, because what is fair when someone has created harm in some way, whether that's to themselves or to their community?
So I think Karen does a really good job of pointing out that idea, which is maybe she has these ideals and principles behind or intentions behind harm reduction. And then she says that, there's this real life violence that they see in front of them. And how do we bring those things together? And Kim, you had a really good response to this a little later on, where you point out that maybe the difference between your perspective and maybe Karen's perspective, or the perspective at Reach, you can have an expectation for someone or an objective for someone and for their life, even when they don't have that expectation or that goal for themselves. yet. Do you want to add to that a little bit?
Yeah, there have been times in my life that I haven't had any direction, and I needed to listen to other people speaking into my life and giving me those positive outcomes that were possible. Mm-hmm. And we do that for the men who come to us. Sometimes they've lost all hope, and we just need to show them what's possible. And as they see other people around them who are being successful and they're listening to their classes, then they start to get it for themselves. Mm-hmm. And, we do that for our children too, right? Mm-hmm. We expect good things we expect them to get good grades and so on. And I just think that we can expect more in our community. We don't need to just say, well, they're on the street and that's where they want to stay. Yeah. Most everybody that I've talked to really doesn't want to stay there. Nobody I know wants to be homeless. Mm-hmm. They may be pulled down by addiction or whatever. They might not want to be controlled with lots of rules, mm-hmm. but they really don't want to stay on the street. So let's help them to see a better future.
Yeah. They probably also don't want to be controlled by addiction.
No.
And so I just think that's so helpful and important. It's actually maybe more respectful of the individual and who they are as a human being to have hope and expectation for them, whether
right.
it's recovery, sobriety, entering your program, and not having to sleep on the street anymore.
Yeah, you think about it. Who are the people in your life who have spoken into it and into you, and you want to prove them right, mm-hmm. that you really are capable, and that it causes you to try harder. Those are the people that you really look back and go, they helped me. They really helped me. So that's what I'd like to see us do more of.
Someone else who joined you on the bench shared this from his own experience. His name is Joe Barsana. I hope I'm saying mm-hmm. that correctly. He's the housing case manager for King County's Drug Diversion Court, which mm-hmm. allows people charged with drug-related crimes to get their charges dismissed if they go through a pretty intensive treatment and kind of stabilization program. And Joe went through this program himself. I loved listening mm-hmm. to what he shared with you. And particularly this piece that we're about to listen to about the role of accountability and someone else's expectations.
It's very easy to slip back in, and it doesn't start with the relapse. It starts with thinking. It starts with your actions. And the second you have a peer, a friend, someone who's looking at, or the prosecutor or the judge who kind of holds you accountable, I always say accountability to me is actually empowerment, because when you feel like you've been held accountable and you reach that potential and the requirement mm-hmm. that you reach the expectations that others have for you,
right?
It's fulfilling.
So Joe says when someone has an expectation for you and you fulfill it and you meet their expectation, that's the most fulfilling mm-hmm. thing ever, and that helped turn his life around. How do you see that idea in practice at Bread of Life Mission?
It's exactly that. As we hold boundaries that are healthy and speak into their lives about what's possible, and then give them the tools they need then to make that possible, the guys are feeling so much empowerment in that. And then they start to believe in themselves. And then other guys see them moving forward and they believe in themselves. It's a cycle, just like we've seen the cycle of allowing people to live on the street mm-hmm. in tents. And it just pulls more people into that. Whereas if we're doing it the way that Joe is talking about, it's going to cause more and more people to have hope in themselves and be empowered to change their lives.
Yeah, and I appreciate Joe's perspective, because I think it shows that the pathway to that can look different. It could be at Bread of Life Mission, mm-hmm. or maybe it's through a court mandate in order to get your charges dropped. Mm-hmm. But the principle is the same, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's just human principle. People rise to what's expected of them, and if we expect a tent on the street, mm-hmm. that's what we're going to get.
Well, I want to encourage everyone to watch more, maybe not the full 24 hours, but more of the conversations that you had with people. Is there anything else that you found particularly challenging or that you learned from during your time on the bench?
Well, I didn't like seeing the rats coming out in Pioneer
no.
Square, as that was challenging to sit on that bench and go, okay. But really, the thing that I found just most interesting was that everybody I talked to mentioned relationship and the importance of that. Whether it's, the people experiencing homelessness, much of it is a lack of relationships. We have to be in relationship with them to come out of homelessness, and that takes an exorbitant amount of staff time. And we have to be in relationship with each other. The collaborative partners, we have to be talking, we have to see each other as real human beings. And as we form that relationship and sometimes disagree, but be okay with disagreement, I think we're going to find the solutions. But as long as we're talking heads and going to our own ends of the, spectrum on our beliefs, then I think we're going to find what needs to happen to get us out of this crisis.
Yeah, I agree. And I think your 24 hours showed just that you can have these really productive conversations, even with people who don't agree with you on all of the details. And so I appreciate you for doing that, and for all of your team at Bread of Life Mission for investing in people's lives and treating the whole person and seeing them transformed and back in the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to that conversation with Kim Cook of Bread of Life Mission. I hope that you found it insightful and encouraging, and that you learned something from the voices that we shared and from Kim as well. Be sure to subscribe and follow wherever you're listening so that you don't miss the next episode of Restorations.